Chelsea Garlick and welcome to the first episode of Chelsea Bakes. Today we are going to feature my Aunt Lorraine's sugar cookie recipe. Now growing up, I always loved to eat cookies and milk every night before bed with my parents. It was kind of a tradition we had every night. And today's theme is going to be Lucy cookies. Now you might be wondering, what is a Lucy cookie? My dog, which happens to also be one of my most favorite things ever, is named Lucy. So today we're gonna make cookies in honor of her. The first step is to add 3.5 cups of all-purpose baking flour. Now I already mixed it up in this bowl to save time, but so you can add any type of brand that you usually use. I just use the Martin's brand or whatever is on sale. It all tastes the same. And then the second thing you want to add once you get all your flour in the bowl is a cup of sugar, white sugar. So that's what gives them their sweet flavor. So you add a cup of that. The recipe is really simple once you get the hang of it. Then you're going to want to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And once you get all this in the bowl, you're going to want to make sure you mix it very well so there's no clumps. And last, for the dry ingredient, we'll add a teaspoon of baking soda. Now, I usually opt to mix with a hand mixer because I find it to be much more convenient. However, if you do have a stand KitchenAid, that works as well. So let's get the mixer ready. You want to mix the dry ingredients. And you don't have to mix them very long, just for a few moments until everything goes together and is well combined. So there are the dry ingredients. After that, and I've already got this prepared as well for convenience purposes, you'll want to add a cup of vegetable shortening. I use Crisco brand, but you can use whatever you opt for. And this you'll want to mix on a high-medium speed to make sure it really goes into fine crumbs so you don't have any clumps of the Crisco or the vegetable shortening. Sometimes I turn it up a little bit higher. Seems to help the clumps break up. I would say mix it for about a minute or so until you get fine crumbs. You'll want it to look a bit like this once you're done with the dry ingredients. Okay, so now we're gonna mix up the wet ingredients. You're gonna wanna combine 2 eggs. I use the large ones. Helps the dough stick together. When you mix the dough, it's going to be a little sticky, and that's what you want. You'll have to flour the surface. to make sure they don't stick to the table or your countertop. Then you'll want to add 1/4 cup of milk. Then we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Then you're going to want to beat the ingredients together. I like to use a fork for this step. It doesn't take long to combine them, just make sure they're really well mixed. Well combined. So once you have all those ingredients well combined, you're going to want to mix them in with the dry ingredients. In this step, I usually start with the hand mixer, but towards the end you do end up having to mix it with your hands because the dough is very sticky. And that's what you want because it makes the nice consistency when you eat them. I usually do a pretty high speed. On my mixer it's a 3, a 4, or a 5 because it does tend to get sticky relatively quick. You can already see it's almost not even letting the mixer go through the dough. So usually once it gets to this point, I like to get all the dough off the mixers. And you'll want to mix it together. Make sure your hands are washed. You can see it's very, very sticky. So you'll want to get that all mixed together. It takes a few minutes once you get all the crumbs and everything mixed in. I usually form it in a ball, and you can even freeze this dough for up to a week and use it later if you don't have time to actually do the cutouts. I sometimes do that when I have to make them for weddings or parties. So you want to make sure it forms a nice round ball. Sometimes I've also found if you stick it in the fridge for an hour or so, the cookies tend to bake very well. But you can use it immediately. It's whatever your preference. So you'll want the dough to look kind of like this. Okay, so now we're going to roll out the dough and cut out the shapes. But before you do so, I always like you to preheat the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll do that first. So I don't usually opt to roll the whole ball of dough because it is a large amount. I usually just take a small portion, like 1/4 of it or so, and then form it into a smaller ball. It makes it easier to manage when you're rolling out the cookies. And it is very sticky, so you'll want to make sure that you do have a section of flour in a separate bowl ready to spread out on the table or your countertop. You just spread that out. And it is also nice to have a spatula on hand. I prefer a metal one. It makes it easier to get the sticky cookies off the table and transfer them to the baking pan. It also helps if you roll the dough a little bit in some of the flour. And then I also opt for the baking pans that have no edges because they're easier to scoop the cookies off so you don't ruin their shapes whenever they're done baking out of the oven to cool. So you want to flatten the dough a little bit. And then also I opt to use a marble baking pin, rolling pin. If you refrigerate the pin prior, it also helps with the rolling out of the dough. So you'll want to roll it out so it's about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch thick, depending on how thick you like your sugar cookies. I prefer them to be on the thinner side, but you can do either or. So we'll start with our first Lucy cookie. Usually just peel the dough from around it. You can see it's very sticky. This is where the spatula comes in hand. Transfer it over to the baking dish. And this recipe usually makes 5 to 6 dozen sugar cookies. Unless you do want them on the thicker side, then it tends to be a little bit less, around 3 dozen. And also leave them very well spread out, about 2 inches in between so the shapes don't overlap. So now that you got your Lucy cookies cut out, or any shape that you chose to use, we're going to put them in the oven to bake. Again, we did set the oven to preheat at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, so by the time you're done cutting out your cookies, the first batch at least, you should be able and be ready to put them in the oven. There are a few steps. It does get a little bit tricky here. You're going to have to watch very closely when you bake these cookies. You're going to want to bake them for 4 minutes. I usually set a timer on my oven. And then after the 4 minutes is up, you're going to want to rotate the entire tray in the oven. And once you rotate it, you're going to bake them for another 3 minutes at 350. And after that, 7 minutes total, you can take them out to cool. So we'll put these ones in right now.
Hi, I'm Janice, and I'm here to answer all your questions about EXP. TiVo Suggestions has to do with shows that you may or may not like. On your remote, you'll find a red thumbs down, you'll find a green thumbs up. If you use those on a movie that you like or dislike, then TiVo will use that information to provide the shows that are more to your liking. It's not complicated.
So now that the cookies are out of the oven and cooling off, we're going to mix up the frosting. You're going to want to start with 3/4 a cup of the Crisco vegetable shortening again. And it's very important that you're very precise with the ingredients for the icing, or else it can have a too runny consistency or too thick and it doesn't spread well on the cookies. And then you'll want to melt a 1/2 stick of salted butter. And then you want to beat the butter and the Crisco together until you have a light, fluffy texture at a medium-high speed. I would say mix it for about 30 seconds to a minute. Make sure you scrape down the sides of the bowl. So once you have a light and fluffy texture, you're going to want to add a pound or half a bag of a 2-pound powdered sugar or confection sugar bag. I found it's easiest if you just buy the 2-pound bag and split it in half instead of actually measuring out a pound of sugar, in case you don't have a weigher. So once you have the powdered sugar, you're going to want to add 4 to 5 tablespoons of milk. I usually add 4 and then mix it a little bit to see if it's the right consistency. And then if you need it to be a little bit more moist, you can add a 5th one. And you'll also want to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And you mix on a medium-high speed. So it looks like it's a little bit thick. I'll probably want to add another tablespoon of the milk. That makes it 5 total. And scrape down the sides, make sure you get all the sugar. And then we're going to pipe the icing into piping bags to actually decorate the sugar cookies. So you want to have folds in your icing and make sure that it's a relatively thick consistency so it doesn't run when you're icing the cookies out of the piping bags. Because they're in your hand, they can get a little bit warm. Sometimes I even chill the icing for about 5 minutes. Now you're going to want to transfer the icing we just made into the 12-inch disposable decorating bags. And then I use the star tips for the decorating. I use a larger one for the nose and a smaller one for the fur of the dog. And then we also have small eyes for decorating, candy eyes. First, I'm going to mix some of the icing into a smaller bowl so I can make it darker for the nose. They have all different colors of icing. You can use brown, gray. I chose to use black because Lucy has a black nose. I use the gel food coloring, but you can use any type that you like. So we're gonna mix that up. You just need a little bit since it's just for her nose. So there we have the black icing. So we're going to want to transfer it into the piping bags. I usually use a spoon to scoop it in. It makes it easier. Again, sometimes I will put the icing bags in the fridge if it's a warmer day out or humid, so it gets a little bit thicker. It tends to make it easier when you're decorating the cookies. So there we have the white icing. Always save some. You don't want to fill up the bag the whole way because it'll pour out the top. So you're going to want to make sure you can just get it in the bottom half and then twist it. We'll put a little bit of the black icing in for the nose. You want to make sure that you get it all pressed down so there's no air pockets. Now I'm going to show you how we decorate it. We'll start with the fur. So we're going to grab one of the cookies off of the tray, one of our finished products. So I like to start with the snout. We'll test out this icing real fast on the... So you're gonna wanna get really close and just dab the icing in little star peaks. And the tips make it very easy to do so. It is very time consuming. So if you don't have a lot of time and you just need them for a quick party, you can also spread the icing. However, I prefer to use the disposable piping bags. Do the snout of the dog first. We'll move on to the ears. The more you practice, the easier it is. You get pretty fast at it once you learn to make them often. So you'll just want to fill in every space on the cookie surface with a little star of icing. So once you have it all filled in, you're going to want to get the black icing and make the nose. We'll just do a little. 1, 2, 3. Like to make like an upside down heart. And then we'll get the candy eyes and apply those. And we're done. There you have it, a Lucy cookie. Hi everybody, this is Lucy, and we just want to thank you for watching the first episode of Chelsea Bakes, and enjoy your cookies.